Hello, everyone. This is Will from Dragon's Den. Previous weeks, we did painting. After that, we did drawing. And today, we're going to go over some comics. We're going to make our own comics, but I'm just going to go over kind of some basics of comics that exist in the world, stuff that you might see that other people have done. This is kind of a superhero comic book. This is from the United States. We have panels, space in between the panels called gutters, word balloons. This is a Japanese comic or manga. Same layout. It goes right to left instead of left to right, but still have panels, word balloons, the gutters in between the panels, and all of that. This is another American comic from Marvel instead of DC this time. And this is actually a fully painted comic as well, but again, all the same elements. We have captions, sometimes in boxes, sometimes just floating in the panel, in the space, depending on how they go, and then the areas around there. Sometimes when we have a full image, it's called a splash, but again, still all the same elements from everything that we've seen before. This is a French comic from an artist called Moebius, or Jean Girard. In France, they actually call comics bande dessinée. But again, all the same elements that we see in everything else. In some of the word balloons are squared, but they're still there, same as in all the other stuff that we looked over. So if all comics have all the same elements, no matter where you go in the world, that kind of makes it easier for us making our own. And so when we do that, I'm going to show you some of the stuff that we can use for that. Alright, so to get started, I'm going to use this paper from a company called Deleter. They're from Japan. And what's really cool about this paper, it's kind of on the thin side, which is thinner than some of the stuff that I use for some comics. But what's cool is that this has a printed border and measurement guide already on the page, so I have to do a lot less work to get started. Now when I'm working on the comic, any old pencil will do. Draw with any paper, any pencil. Mechanical pencil is fine, regular wood pencil, whatever you have. Again, when I'm drawing, I usually use my lead holder and a nice eraser as well. This is also kind of cool. This is a non-photo blue pencil. It's actually kind of gives you the same effect as what the printed page is made out of. It basically just doesn't show up in reproductions very well. And then ink pens for when you're done with your artwork. Now, if you don't have a pre-printed page, that's fine. You can use any kind of ruler. This is a T-square, and this is just a basic ruler. Anything to kind of help you get the marks, your panels. Really, I think the important thing is that you just give yourself a margin on the page so you're not going right to the edge. It kind of looks nice, just like on this painting. Just give yourself a margin instead of going to the edge of the page. It just kind of looks nice, and it gives you some room to kind of work with and do some neat stuff. All right, so the basic different stages of making a comic are, in the simplest terms, start with a thumbnail, work into a rough, and take your rough, kind of work out some of your problem solving and fix some of the things that maybe you're not happy with, and that's when you work into a final. The more work you do on the first two phases, the easier the last phase is going to be. Thumbnail is all about just basics. The rough is still keeping things kind of loose and really just solving things that you don't like, maybe fixing faces, hands, or poses of your figures, working out background, perspective, things like that. It's really the final is just about kind of working in your last details and things like that. So for the thumbnail, it's very loose. It can be sloppy, it can be scribbly, it can be messy, it can be just really basic shapes. Matter of fact, some of the panels that I'm working on here, I am working out where my panels are going, where my balloons are going, where my characters are, and that sort of thing, but it can be really basic. In fact, some of these are just really basic shapes. Some of them almost look like popsicles. But as long as I understand what's going on, as long as you understand what's going on in your thumbnail, that's the important thing. Just getting the basics down so that you understand what your page is going to look like. Now in the roughs, that's where you're going to start doing your problem solving, fixing things. It's loose. You're adding more detail. You're refining things, but it's really not about worrying about if it's pretty or if it's nice or what you want it to look like in the end yet. This is really about getting the things that you don't like and that you don't want out of there. So fixing the proportions of things, refining details. Again, this is where you're kind of getting rid of the stuff that you're not happy with and solving your problems. And it's less about detail and finish and more about getting rid of the stuff that you're not happy with. And if you've done all that, and sometimes the more time that you take on those previous two steps, then you get to this, the final. This is where your line work is nice and clean and sharp, and you're adding lots of details. This is where you do want things to kind of look pretty and nice and finished and crisp. But the cool thing is, like I said, the more work that you do on the first two steps of this, the easier this can be, because you're just going over all the work that you did before. So while I have all these nice details on my page here, and all of these things kind of worked out, really it was just going over what I did before. So this step was one of the easiest steps. I think the thumbnail and the final can be easy as long as you put in enough work, especially in the rough stage. So that's where I did a lot of the stuff where if I struggled, if I got frustrated with things, it didn't matter as much and I didn't have to worry about it because it was still loose. And because I kind of kept pace with that, this step got easier. Because all I had to do was go over the work that I did before. So if you just stick to each phase and worry about what you need to worry about with those phases, it can be a lot easier to make your comic book. So you have your panels, your balloons, your characters, your backgrounds, and again, just stick to what each phase does best. So with thumbnails, the best way to think about this is just your basics. You just want to lay the foundation for what you're building. Simple ideas, it can be messy, it can be sketchy, and in some cases, it's okay if you just have just shapes to represent things. This one, as long as it makes sense to you and you know what you're doing and you have a good plan, that's what's most important. Just make sure that it's clear, all the basics. This is the phase where you want to do all your work. You want to clean things up, you want to refine things, but you're still keeping it loose. You're not worried about how it's looking overall. You're just fixing things. You're making yourself happy. You're getting rid of anything that you don't like, changing anything that you don't like, and making yourself feel good about what's there. So at the end of this phase, as long as you're happy with how everything looks and you feel like you have a good idea of where everything's going, that's the most important thing, and that's when the next phase will be easiest. And that's when you go into your final, adding in your final details. Your line work is clean, your characters are clear, what they're doing is clear in the scene, and you have all your placements of word balloons, panel borders, and everything else going on there. If you let every phase be what it's going to be and you follow what best you want for that, you're going to have a much easier time with things here. And if you do, you make every step a lot easier on yourself, and you're not worried about doing everything at once. I was going to hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was clear enough for you guys, and that it laid things out in a simple process where you can do your own comic book page and kind of have fun doing it. Thanks very much. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys are inspired to make your own comics, and I think it'd be great to see what you guys can come up with next. Thanks very much. You guys stay safe. Take care of yourselves.